Jerry Eisenberg wrote that Eddie Machen was like the talented musician or painter who has skills that other people do not possess, but when they come up short, you cannot always pinpoint exactly how things fell apart. Eddie Machen was the kind of fighter who made more news for his bizarre behavior outside the ring than for what he did in it. As a fighter, he was known as Cautious Eddie for his safety-first fighting style, but to those in law enforcement, he was known as Eddie Machen grew up in the rural town of Redding, California. His father was a mailman supporting 6 sons and his stay-at-home wife. Machen would play basketball and football at Shasta Union High School, and he would be the starting fullback on the team that won its conference championship when he was a sophomore. One of his teachers told him, "Eddie, if you try and keep trying, you'll get to the top. Never quit, and you'll never be disappointed." But Machen would drop out of school after the 10th grade, as he fell in with the wrong crowd. Fed up with his behavior, his family would send him to Oakland to live with his uncle, Dave Mills. Mills was a heavyweight journeyman who once fought the likes of Sam Langford and Louis Firpo. Mills would start Machen in boxing, with Machen winning all 3 of his amateur fights, even getting a write-up in the local paper for one particular vicious knockout. But Machen would have a falling out with his uncle. "When I was younger, I got in with some bad people," Machen said. "There was a ring of us, and we took turns robbing places. We had a big silver barrel gun, and people remembered it, and we got caught 7 times altogether. And then Soledad, and I spent 3 years there." Upon his release from prison, Machen would find work cutting trees and then follow in his father's footsteps and becoming a mailman. But he was still looking for direction, and he would come under the guidance of boxing trainer Lee Hughes, who would turn him professional. Machen would come out of the gates fast, defeating the 3rd-ranked contender Nino Valdez twice after only a year as a pro. He would score wins over a faded Joey Maxim, Bob Baker, and score a 10th-round stoppage of Tommy Hurricane Jackson, which gave Machen the top spot among heavyweight contenders after only 2.5 years as a professional. Reporters would call him the Black Gene Tunney because of his technical skills. He threw crisp punches and blocked return fire beautifully with his shoulders and gloves. They would write of his hard demeanor as he wouldn't even look at an opponent when he knocked them out, and they found this at odds with his easygoing demeanor outside of the ring. Machen was a ladies' man, becoming romantically linked with popular singer Dinah Washington. He also began calling for a fight with heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson, but Patterson's manager, Customato, shrewdly avoided him. Chinks in Machen's armor would show in a dreadfully dull bout against the 2nd-ranked Zora Foley. The fans booed, and the legendary Joe Louis was in attendance, saying, quote, "Machen wouldn't fight. He waits too long." 5 months after his disappointing draw with Zora Foley, Machen would travel to Sweden to take on INGEMAR JOHANSSON. Machen would blame the loss on the fact that he didn't warm up enough in the dressing room. Customato said, quote, "It only proves that Machen can't fight." Machen lobbied for a rematch with Johansson, even going so far as spending $15,000 of his own money in court trying to force a fight. The courts would turn him down, and Johansson would go on to defeat Patterson for the title. Machen would be relegated to fighting the likes of young Jack Johnson, Ruben Vargas, and Garvin Sawyer. Patterson would regain the title, and Machen would call for a winner-take-all bout against Patterson. But there was a feud between Cus D'Amato and Machen's manager, Sid Flaherty, so D'Amato blacklisted Machen from any title opportunity. Machen wouldn't help matters any as he would lose a decision to Foley in January of 1960. In September of that year, he would take on the fighter that everyone else was avoiding, Sonny Liston. "I'm not scared of you," Machen said as he stared into Liston's eyes. "You will be," Liston replied. Machen would taunt Liston throughout their match. "Come on, big punch. Come on, show me that big, terrible punch." Liston would appear to win every round but would lose 2 points for low blows. Machen would claim that he had a sore right shoulder that he injured in sparring, and he complained that his eyes burned throughout the match. He theorized that Liston's handlers would rub medication on his shoulders, which was then transferred to his forehead during the clinches. The sweat would allow the ointment to drip into his eyes. Machen wanted an immediate rematch, but Liston replied, "It takes two to fight." Machen wouldn't. Machen would fight on, defeating Mike DeJohn, but losing to Harold Johnson. His personal problems would accumulate. His younger brother Paul, boxing as a middleweight, would be sent to prison on a first-degree murder charge. Machen had his own troubles, supplementing his income by working as a bouncer in a nightclub and getting challenged by drunk patrons. He felt embarrassed at having to work a job as he was the top heavyweight contender that had to moonlight to make ends meet. He soon lapsed into a depression, and on December 13, 1962, Machen would be discovered by a highway patrolman on the shoulder of a freeway near the town of Vallejo. He had written a suicide note to his wife on the dashboard, and a revolver was on the passenger seat. Machen looked up at the officer with eyes that were a million miles away. "I'm broke," he mumbled. "Someone up there doesn't like me." Machen didn't put up a struggle when taken into custody, but once he was escorted into Napa's psychiatric ward, he went berserk. It would take 7 different attendants to hold him down and shoot him up with tranquilizers. After another incident where he assaulted another attendant, Machen would be fitted with a straitjacket and diagnosed as a schizophrenic. After several months of treatment, he would be released in 1963. "They took me to Napa for observation," Machen said. "I don't remember any of this. Someone said I talked to Joe Louis and Archie Moore, but I don't remember any of it. I know I needed $3,000 and it was Christmas time, and I couldn't get it, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep after they started taking care of me either. I couldn't relax. I felt like I had to go, and then they gave me the electric treatment." 9 months after his mental breakdown, Machen would begin his boxing comeback in September of 1963. He would change managers and trainers, now under the watchful eye of Al Silvani, but the performances of Machen would become more erratic. In a November 1963 match with Dave Bailey, he would knee his opponent in the groin. He would finally get a match against Floyd Patterson, but now Patterson was an ex-champ for 2 years. The fight would take place in Sweden. Patterson would go to the forest to chop wood, while Machen would take to the bars and look for girls. In front of 40,000 Swedish fans, Patterson would shut Machen's eye and win every round en route to a 12-round decision victory. Now, despite the loss, Machen would finally get his shot at a portion of the heavyweight title. The WBA would strip Muhammad Ali of their title as he decided to face Sonny Liston in a rematch instead of their number one contender, Ernie Terrell. The sanctioning body then selected Machen to face Terrell for their now vacant belt. The fight itself resembled 2 teenagers on a third date. After 45 minutes of hugging, clutching, and grabbing, Terrell would win a unanimous decision. Machen's wife Charlotte would state, quote, "That tall chump didn't lay a hand on Eddie." Machen lobbied for a rematch, and sports reporters shuddered at the thought. Machen then blamed the critics and fans for not knowing what real boxing looked like. 7 months later, Machen would return to the identical location of his previous suicidal episode, sitting in his car with a gun by his side. A policeman would arrive and see the revolver on the seat of his pickup truck. He would spare Machen another trip to the psychiatric ward. Instead, Machen would be charged with illegal gun possession and placed on 2 years probation. Returning to the ring, he vowed to become more aggressive and sit down on his punches more. Machen would upset two undefeated prospects in Joey Orbio and Jerry QUARRY, both at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles. Machen would then be matched against 22-year-old Joe Frazier, and some critics believe that it may be too much too soon for Frazier. But Frazier's trainer, Eddie Futch, wasn't fooled. He had studied Machen's films and believed that his legs were gone.
I tried to slug with Joe, Machen said after the bout. I couldn't have picked a tougher guy to turn aggressive. I didn't know what was going on for 6 rounds. They finally stopped it in the 10th. I got a bigger ovation losing that fight than I did winning all of my others. Machen's money troubles would continue as he would file for bankruptcy after the bout, listing debts of over $66,000 and assets of only $13,000. In the ring, he was now seen as bait for any up-and-coming heavyweight who wanted a name on their resume. After losing to Henry Clark, Machen announced his retirement. 2 months later, and needing the money, he would be coaxed back into the ring to face the undefeated Boone Kirkman. Machen would be knocked down 3 times before being stopped in the 3rd round. It would be the last ring appearance for Machen. The now 35-year-old turned to driving a truck, then bartending, before finding regular work as a longshoreman, but he couldn't make ends meet. His wife, Charlotte, divorced him. "I was a fighter for almost 13 years, Machen said. It was hard for me to walk into something else after all that time." In 1968, Machen would be arrested during a barroom brawl in San Francisco. Shortly thereafter, he was caught driving drunk in Berkeley. Machen would threaten to kill the officer who stopped him, and it would take 2 patrolmen to mace and bring the former fighter into custody. Machen dropped out of sight after his release. A Hollywood producer inquired about making a movie on his life, but Machen was nowhere to be found. Machen would seek medical assistance for depression and suicidal thoughts. He would be prescribed antidepressants which would give him bouts of insomnia. He remained bitter about his finances, having earned over $300,000 in the ring and not having a penny saved in the bank. "The fighter has nothing," Machen said, after finally being tracked down for an interview. "Nobody ever took time to look out for the poor guy who bleeds in the ring. But I think the fighter has himself to blame. He's been too stupid." On August 8, 1972, Machen would be found dead near a fire escape at the rear of his apartment in San Francisco. Dressed in pajamas, he had left a trail of blood from the center of the driveway, indicating that he had crawled about 7 feet before he died. His live-in girlfriend was visiting friends out of town and was not present when Machen's body was found. She stated that Machen had called her about midnight to say he was having another bout with insomnia and he was worried about sleepwalking. Machen would die from shock and blood loss from a ruptured liver. He was 40 years old. Local bars that Machen visited would raise money for his funeral costs. A few of his old boxing friends would help raise money as well, handing his mother an envelope with their donations. "It's a shame," a local bartender said of Machen. "You know, you only get one chance in your life to be up there. Just the one chance."